Richard, my good friend, welcome to the program. It's been a while. Yes, so you read the budget. I see you making marks on all over the document you have before you. What's your general impression before we get into it proper?
Good morning to your good self, your viewers. I think you have listeners on radio and my senior brother here. It's a very fine studio. It's my first time.
Oh, I
long
see.
time, yes.
Yeah.
I think that it's a difficulty the finance minister has to go through in trying to craft a budget. Because generally we have a difficult global economy, and so it's a tough sell to be able to figure out a way, especially on the back of what promises they made. And so the expectation was high, and so he did what he has to do. But I see this budget as one that, if you look at it very closely, will fall short of expectation, especially this is in the context of the election, what brought them to office. It falls short of expectation.
Why do you say so?
Well, we'll get into that. My good sister talked about they've given people reliefs and they will enjoy it. I'd like for her to expand on that front because I don't see much of any relief for Ghanaians. Rather, there's going to be a pinch that Ghanaians are going to take in terms of concerns about cost of living. You know, the election was fought really on that front, where the president told us that it was about the economy, in quotes, stupid, right? And so you expected from this budget some indication that is going to drive some agenda to mitigate a rising cost of living for Ghanaians. But you don't see that in there if you look closely. If anything at all, there are indications that cost of living will go up. Also, it falls short of expectation for me because I don't see how the expectation of job creation, which is a key campaign promise of the NDC, the Great Transformation Agenda. I don't see that, featured in the budget. If anything at all, there's going to be a net freeze, at least on the government side, and with a heavy emphasis on consolidation, expenditure-led consolidation. You're looking at some element of contraction in the economy based on that, expenditure, given that such expenditure would be in the productive sector or be such that those, if it's even most of the expenditure at about 10 billion, focusing on consumption, if assuming those consumption or consumables produced here in the country is going to, affect growth in that area, assuming that, those money should have gone there to drive demand to improve local production. And also some of the tax incentive, the extension of the special import levy is going to affect domestic industry production because the cost of living is still going to go up. Some of the inputs they import, and those will be affected. So really, you have not stimulated job creation from that angle. So for me, there's a lot in this budget that leaves me wondering if really what the NDC promised they can do. But my analysis going forward of the budget will focus more on two things, because if we see what the finance minister did, and this was orchestrated. You saw the president during the negotiation with organized labor sent a signal that, the economy has been criminally mismanaged or mishandled, setting the tone also in SONA. And then the finance minister was looking for an avenue to crystallize that perception. And so if you see in the budget, some of the maneuvers he did calls a lot of the data he put out into question. And it became a thing of this is how we're supposed to calculate primary balance, overall fiscal deficit. And it's as if, a game is being played. We'll discuss that. But I would like for us to look at the budget in twofold. The NDC is happy in saying that what the economy they have inherited is terrible. The economy is bad, unprecedented, and all that. We'll talk about that and talk about their own history of managing the economy, because that must be brought front and center. Because if you are the one throwing stones or you're the one seeking equity, you must come with clean hands. And so the way they manage the economy compared to what they are inheriting now, put that side by side and say that this is worse or that is worse. We can do that. And then that is important because it determines their capacity to manage the worst economy they say they have inherited going forward. Because in this budget, I don't see how they are going to drive any growth. And you have seen that already. The macro indicators or the macro targets they have put out there is actually dampening, expectation. They're saying that they're going to grow somewhere around 4.4, right? 4.4 for 2025. When 2024, you had a 5.7 growth. What is informing that? Is it though they are setting expectation low so they can exceed it, or what is the basis of that? And then the other part of the analysis which you must look at is, so first of all, the discussion of what they have inherited. We'll finish that conversation and look also, then going forward, what have they put in this budget to give us Ghanaians indication that they are going to build or going to improve what they say is bad that they have inherited. So I think the conversation should be looked in those two forms.
That's clear. So Jackson, so let's get into it now. I mean, very difficult situation, and you agree that it's a high bet in many respects. How does he navigate, or the government, Atu Forson, how does he navigate this? A number of promises, have been made. Taxes have been, abolished or scrapped. How does he navigate this difficult situation? What should be his guiding principle in seeking to bring relief or the promised relief to Ghanaians with this budget, given all the circumstances we have?
Well, my first comment is that when you are in a hole, the first thing you do is to stop digging. And when you are in a crisis, right, there's some adjustment you have to make in literally cutting your coat according to your size. I heard my brother Ahiagbah here, and the crux of the issue is this: as far back as January of last year, there was an indication put out that the economy had been turned around. A lot of us disagreed. That you remember we had debates.
Yes, the economy had turned the corner.
But the economy had turned the corner, and the economy had not turned the corner. It had not turned the corner. So when we look at a situation where the numbers, right, and unless you can conclusively challenge those numbers, right, and then you've seen the World Bank document that talks about how the growth that we saw was fueled by even more debt, right? Are we surprised at the debt, how much money we owe? If you ask me, let's talk first about the debt, right? The first thing is that if you look at the situation where we cannot borrow from the
Eurobond, the international market,
which may not necessarily be a bad thing. Then what did we have to do? First of all, make sure that the deficit was within reason. So you see that in the primary, at the end of year, primary balance is set at 1.5. Now, it's important to explain the primary balance, which is saying from all the money that the government is expecting to get and what it's expecting to spend without paying for debt servicing, paying the interest that is due, it should make some surplus. In this case, they projected a surplus of about 20 billion, right? We will still borrow. We will still service our debt. So there's a net deficit. But at least we are heading in the right direction. Now, because we still have to borrow, you would notice that one of the things he talked about aggressively was the fact that they are driving down the cost of borrowing. They're driving down the cost of borrowing. Because you see, what hit us hardest in this crisis was not necessarily the debt to GDP. Because we could argue that some countries have debt to GDP
very
rates
high, yeah,
very high. It was the ratio of debt service to our revenue.
Ratio of debt service to our revenue.
Yes, how much we paid, we're expected to pay in interest costs, and how much of it. And at one point, it was as high as 50% of our revenue. So one of the high bets he's done, right, is to drive down the cost of borrowing. And he's driven it down in some pretty aggressive way. If you look at the treasury markets from yesterday, I mean, 91-day T-bills have dropped as low as in the region of 15 plus percent, 182, 16 plus percent, and then 365, 18 in the region of 18%. That's a dramatic drop from the highs of 25%, 26%, 27% that was inherited. So let's all.
Let's stay on that for. I know you've been big on treasury bills, etc. But driving that down, the counter argument is that when you drive that down, the market no more has confidence in the treasury market. So the markets will go looking for other things to put their money into. So for example, they'll go buy dollars, and that puts pressure on the domestic currency, and that exacerbates your interest, your exchange rate woes. How about it? Because if the exchange rate is terrible, there's a way it comes back to bite us, because everything else.
Some of your debt is even denominated in dollars.
Exactly. So what's the point really in driving down the treasury?
But let's look at how the rates have been driven down. The rates have been driven down by going to the market and only taking what you need. So, as against the previous regime, where you go to the market and if you went to the market looking for 5 billion and there was 8 billion on the table, you scooped all the 8 billion at whatever cost. This time, he's driven down the market, because remember that what he needs is put out before we go to the market. And he's only taking what he needs. So if in that case, how can we complain that what is our problem? That he should take more than he needs to keep rates high? Does that make sense? He's saying, before I go to the market, I need 5 billion. When I go to the market and I take 5 billion, the rates drop. That can't be a crime. Two, by signaling that we will reduce our debt service, we are putting ourselves in a better place, right, to service that debt. So shouldn't that drive confidence in the economy? So I'm not sure I can identify with all. The biggest argument is that there is a gap, an inflation gap, that inflation is still at 20-something percent. So if you buy T-bills, you're taking pain.
So that's negative. And so why will I go back? Why will I do that? Because inflation is high, TB rates are dropping.
Lower,
Normally you want to benchmark it against inflation.
Doesn't that tell you that truly maybe those who are buying rates truly believe that the interest the inflation rates will come down? Because if you didn't believe it, why would you do it? Remember that some of the bits, right, were as low as 12% on Friday. If somebody felt strongly that inflation was going to be at 23%, 24%, why would he put in there and say 12%? I'm just saying that let's look at the behavior of the market. The market is signaling something. The market is signaling that truly, at this point at least, they expect inflation to come down. at this point, the Minister of Finance is only taking as much as required.
I see.
We should be happy.
No,
Secondly,
I'll come to you.
secondly, there's another thing. We are not going to get this out of this situation without some pain.
So there's more pain to come.
Every day is painful. So long as the inflation hasn't reached the levels at which we're expecting, it is painful. And we're taking pain from 2022 to date. But here's the thing. Somebody has to take the pain. If somebody is volunteering because we didn't put a gun to their heads to bid for the money, right? If somebody is prepared to take some pain in expectation of a reduced inflation rate ahead, what is our complaint? And you see, we shouldn't act as if we wish this economy ill. We shouldn't act as if when some things go right, we hate it. We may say there are risks. I'm the first to lift up my hand and say, this is a high risk maneuver. But we should appreciate what the risk is. We should appreciate what it is delivering. And we should thank God that at this moment, there's some relief in place.
Very well. Right, Franklin Kojo, welcome to the program. But Madam Monacote, the issue from the minority really is that you, in just 2 months, you borrowed a lot, 73 billion. And Gideon Wako, for example, says at this rate, we may end up borrowing in excess of 200 billion. When you compare it to what happened in 2017, the situation is way worse now. What's the strategy? Are we going to continue borrowing this much from the domestic market? What's the strategy really? And what's your response to the concerns that you may succeed in driving down the treasury bill rate, but it will have serious implications for the economy in other sectors, like the exchange rate, for example? What's the government strategy around that?
So, Salom, thank you very much for that. Just before I come to the strategy, I just want to thank Mr. Joe Jackson for his response to the interest rates going down. And the question you asked him about, therefore, investors would want to put their monies into currency, foreign currency and so forth. Actually, there's a pent-up demand from the private sector for these funds. So we are going to see, most likely, we are going to see the commercial banks being able to on-lend to the private sector. So as we term it, there will be a crowding in of the private sector. In the past, we had a crowd out by government being in that space, whether it was the NDC government or the MPP government. There had always been government crowd out of that space. Now we'll see a private sector crowd into that space. And at those interest rates, those are attractive for them. Now, with respect to the debt strategy, of course, like Joe said, this time, there's only borrowing of what is needed. So we won't be taking that whole space. Yes, there's been a short-term increase because we are still involved in the domestic debt restructuring, and we still have to look at the foreign portion that has to be paid to the private investors who came in. Also, you know that there were some investors into the domestic debt. So in terms of USD to CD, that amount too has increased, and we have to sort all that debt servicing out. In the first few quarters of this year, at least 1 and 2, we are going to see a resetting. You're going to see perhaps the amount going up before it can even come down. So with respect to that pent-up demand from private sector for that, they will come in, and we will all, I'm saying government will only be in there for the short term, not medium to long term. We should see the private sector going in there and they're borrowing from the domestic market, whilst government works on the debt strategy to bring the debt to a sustainable level and to increase GDP so that those percentages can make sense in terms of sustainability and signal to the investor community and to the lending community that we are moving in the right direction. Debt servicing will take place as expected. The economy will grow on a sustainable basis, not on a rushed basis, but on a sustainable basis. The problems that we had in the past, even up to the immediate past, are not problems that are resolved in a matter of months. It will take a little bit of time. But the good news is that we are already being able to show the actions that are being taken place. So the Debt Management Office is going to come out and show clearly the debt strategy going forward. You know, the budget is always multiple year, so we'll show that strategy going forward. And one of the main things is leveraging on the amount that was allocated for the $10 billion push. So as you noticed, $4 billion was put out there. The idea, most likely, I haven't spoken to the minister directly, will be to leverage on that $4 billion to attract investments and borrowings in order to start to put that infrastructure into place. Ghana's economy, the fundamental is flawed, as we all know. We've talked about this at length, and we need to make that change now. It's going to mean some pain to get that change done. But once that change is done and we have the infrastructure in place, we'll see government come out of areas that private sector should be in, and we'll see private sector take up that role, take it strongly, and government will now be more in compliance and regulatory, making sure that private sector is not taking advantage of the nation, but rather contributing to grow the nation. So that will be the debt strategy, where we'll be looking at resolving the issues now, and then going forward, find very out-of-the-box ways of dealing with debt. The bilaterals may not be as strong. We are a lower middle income country. We don't qualify for certain grants and so forth. The multilateral situation will also be an issue. You know the issue already on the bilateral with the USAID portion going out. But that doesn't stop us from growing. The idea is that with import substitution, with the economic transformation agenda, especially in the area of agriculture, we should do well. We were lucky. We saw end 2024 where the extractive industry came in strong. Of course, prices had gone up for gold, but oil and gold came in strong in terms of production. And production is not only helped by price, but it's helped by cost of production. So utilities, people, the consumables that are bought in that space. And that is why I will say right now that I'm a little concerned about the growth and sustainability tax on the extractive industry going up. You know, I wish that wouldn't be the case. But in the context that right now our major source of funding will be from the tax refund account, and trying to navigate the space to release some money. And maybe that may be a measure that will come in, but not for long, because that industry sector is the sector that will help this nation to come out of its debt, because they bring in the foreign currency. Again, in the area of agriculture, we are looking to that also bring in the foreign currency. So I don't see us having a currency destabilization, and I don't see inflation going further up. If anything, with food security and with the good relations that we are enjoying with our neighboring countries, we should be able to bring food inflation down. And that will impact inflation considerably. So the strategy is in the right direction. It will take a bit of time. But the important thing, like Joe said, is let's all support what is good for it to happen for this nation. Because driving us all into a ditch does not help. But I am happy to also mention that I think the last 2 quarters of last year showed some dedication from the previous government in making sure that they worked on the domestic debt restructuring specifically. And I think that kudos to them for that. Governance is a continuum. It's not one person's job.
I see Richard Ahiagbah smiling in his head.
That
I see Richard Ahiagbah smiling in his head for
that's
the
what
good point.
Yes, right. He said we must say what is good.
Great. But you made a point about
taking from there,
the 3% growth and sustainability levy. It's interesting because you said you wish it could have been better. And so
I wish we wouldn't increase it, but you know, there are times when you do have to tighten your belt. So it is.
I see. That's interesting. All right, Franklin is on. Franklin, welcome to the program. And we're just looking at the budget generally. I know you followed keenly. Did the budget meet your expectation?
Well, good morning to Honorable Kothe, and good morning to Joe, and good morning to I don't know the gentleman.
No,
Sorry.
that's Richard Ahiagbah.
Oh, Richard. Oh, sorry.
You see, you are not recognizing your friend in opposition now.
No. I am. I'm just good to see you, Richard. Oh, sorry. Well, look, all I can say is that the budget more or less somehow paid homage to some of the promises that were made in the manifesto. For some time now, sometimes we normally do not see that synergy, right? And by the way, I thought was probably I thought was a bit clever, if not more clever, in making sure that the very low-hanging fruit that were promised in the manifesto that relate to livelihoods, the importance of livelihood, people's survival, and those things spoke to me as somebody who was honoring what he had intended, and in actual fact, what they wanted to do. So yes, there are no big, if you like, should I call them big calculations and minuses here and there, but essentially just paying fidelity to those little promises that people tend to think about. For me, was actually the biggest takeaway from this budget. If you promise that you are going to alleviate, the hardship in terms of paying tuition for the first year students, well, they honored it, right? If they said that they were going to, what's it called, 51, provide some seed money for the Women's Development Bank. Well, there is a seed money, but of course they said they set up a bank. We were not told how much they put in, but now they said they want to put some seed money. If you netted off that seed money, however small it is, against the reliefs that were mentioned, they were not big reliefs, but of course those tax reliefs, which were obviously characterized as nuisance taxes. It tells you that, look, somehow some people would have some disposable income against which, if let's say a woman wanted, a woman who sells wanted maybe 200 cedis from the bank, and now that we probably would not ask for 200, but probably will get about ask for maybe 100 because somehow some disposable income has come back to her. I mean, these are little things, but you see, if you combine all of it into a big, it creates a very big, that I call it a savings for everybody. So for me, I thought that the first thing I wanted to say about the budget is that it paid homage to the things that they intended to do, and those things were quite political as well. I mean, look, the betting tax and all of that, people are happy that these things will be scrapped. Not that the NPP, when 2017, they did the same thing, right? They also did VSHS and did. So somehow, if you honor your own promises, somehow people tend to gravitate. And I think the other thing I want to say is that I actually wondered how I thought was going to basically fill that gap that would have been created from the taxes that were repealed. Were going to be repealed. And when he mentioned the tax refund thing, I was certainly amazed. I said, well, where did that come from? Then it turns out that I have a family brother for salt, not blood related, at the customs. And he called me and said, look, Frankie, that's true. And that tax fund is actually a slush fund that certain politicians use to pay for, suspicious projects. And he mentioned Kelly, GBG, that's where they paid the money from. So you never know. I mentioned SML, that's where they paid the money from. And some suspicious judgment debt. And so maybe I told you, I realized I don't know. We'll use the money this week. So I'm saying this because it's not it doesn't because I said it, but a technical person actually told me, even before I mention that I think on your network when you spoke with Ben. So for me, I think these things matter to me. I mean, we can talk about deficits and all of that. Well, he didn't want to get bogged into those boxes where he needs to think too much, where he didn't want to spend so much, right? Maybe the other thing I always say is that, look, there are still challenges when it comes to the way, what's it again?
You have some questions.
Anyway, so there are still challenges as to how some of the big things they said they were going to do will be funded. I mean, I wasn't particularly keen. I was interested in knowing what would feed or go into the 13.something billion Ghana cedi. What's it called? The big push. Some of the, allocation from the big push fund. I don't know what we're going to use that money for. I'm sure maybe the details will be found in the other aspects of the budget, but I thought I wanted to hear something more. And of course, the 24-hour thing too is really important. And I think they should get on with it because, you see, there are sectors already begging for things like this. And some of them are low-hanging fruits, the technology side of things, digitalization space. There's a lot that can be done in that space to enhance this policy. So, when you don't want to do too many things in the budget and also try to, and then at the same time, you appeal to the basic needs of people that have cried for certain taxes to be taken away, you probably have done your job. And that's what a political minded economist will do. And I think he read the politics well, and he did that. That's why everybody seems to be somehow happy with the budget, not because there's too many wonderful things in the budget, not at all. I mean, I thought the allocation to agri, for instance, was woefully low. I mean, but who is talking about agri? People are talking e-levy, people are talking petty tax. But those were the things that we campaigned on, and to the extent that he's done it, and then and again found money to fill that gap. It's interesting, really interesting.
I see. Great.